We made the promise that we would start at 5:30, and we've already broken our promise. But as the mayor, I guess you can't expect you to keep all your promises. But my name is Jim Hunt. I'm the mayor of Belle Meade, and I welcome each of you to hear an exciting and educational program on the AMP. First of all, I'd like to thank Belle Meade United Methodist Church for making their wonderful facility available to us. And secondly, I'd like to thank our presenters, Diane Neal and Professor Malcolm Getz. As you may know, the Pro-AMP supporters informed us a few weeks ago that they were no longer doing debates and that we'd be sort of on our own. Well, we took a lemon and are making lemonade out of it. And so we're going to have an exciting program tonight, and it's going to be, while we were disappointed, we decided that this was the best way to go. We've got a great turnout. I'm really happy everybody's here. I don't want to give away too much. I've got a few little ground rules. Number one is that there is a handout here, AMP 4, and we ask that you would fill one of these out where we get your address, especially this is the people from live in Belle Meade. So it says, are you in favor of mass transit or are you in favor of the AMP as proposed? You can wait till we get through to fill that out. But put comments down there. This way we'll give the commissioners of Belle Meade a good read on how our citizens do feel. Secondly, if you have a question, we would first of all prefer that you write the question down and hold it up, and we'll have someone come and pick those up. We will, later on during the presentation, Lee will be deciding on questions that could come from the audience, and I will have a handheld microphone, and I'll walk out to you and he'll give you some rules on what he expects from that. But with that, I would like to introduce my dear friend and Belle Meade resident, Lee Barfield. And before you clap for Lee, you need to know that we asked 7 other people to do this before Lee accepted. And I think he made the comment, we scraped the bottom of the barrel. We really could not have gotten a better person to do this. Lee graduated from Vanderbilt with a BA in 68 and then got his JD at Vanderbilt in 74. He is with Bassberry, and he represents many, many well-known clients. He is are you a senior partner? Is that what it's called?
Senior, young partner.
A young partner. Anyway, you're going to enjoy him, and you might enjoy him. You won't maybe enjoy him as much as the AMP presentation, but you will enjoy it, Lee. I am so happy to introduce to you our moderator, Lee Barfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it very much. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Should be a lot of fun, and hopefully, if we do it well, and I think we will, it will be very informative. Since the proponents of the AMP are not here, I think we've encouraged, I've asked Malcolm and Diane and everyone who's here to kind of try to, as best we can, get the facts out to you so that your questions that are related to the facts involving the AMP are answered as accurately as possible. We are pleased to have Council Lady Emily Evans. Emily, you want to stand up or so you can see her? Emily is here, and there may well be some questions, detailed factual questions that she may be able to help us answer. And so if that's the case, Emily, we appreciate your input.
We trusted her enough to give her a microphone, too.
Yeah, that's right. The Senator Steve Dickerson from the Belle Meade area and from Davidson County cannot be here today, but he asked that I pass along to you the fact that he would like to be here. He's on the Capitol Hill today with various meetings and so forth. He is listening to you and those of you who are expressing your opinions one way or the other, and I just want you to know, and he wants you to know, that he's very interested in your views on the AMP. We are delighted to have Malcolm Getz and Diane Neal here to make a presentation about the AMP. They are, as you know, by the way, how many of you have been to one of these presentations before? Okay, so you're pretty informed. Okay, so maybe we don't need to cover facts. You know all the facts. And, well, that's good. Okay, so this is a very informed audience. I myself have been to one of these presentations in the past and look forward to this one today. Before I introduce Diane and Malcolm to you, let me ask you for a couple of, listen up for a couple of logistical matters. Mayor Hunt suggested them. There is a microphone or microphones here. So if you have a question that you would like to express orally, if you would just raise your hand, point to Emily or whoever, and they will bring you a microphone. And I would like to ask you, when you have a question, if you would stand up and just state your name and then ask your question, that would be great. I would ask that the questions be short and to the point. You know, if you want to make a speech, don't do that. You know, get out the point, and you know, and make your questions known. There's a lot of ground to cover here, and we want to do it in the time allowed. The other thing you need to do is speak up, so that everybody. Can you hear me? By the way, everybody in the back, is it working good? Okay, great. If it doesn't, you know, just wave your hands so that we want everybody to be able to hear. I think it's also important that we be respectful of each other and differences of opinion. This is a very intense issue. The feelings about it are strong, pros and cons, and then there's some neutrals out there that don't know exactly what it's all about or what AMP means. I don't know that. Does anybody know what AMP means? Oh, either. We'll find that out. Anyway, let's be respectful of each other, and I'm sure you will, and we'll have a good time doing this afternoon. Now, our speakers today, we're very fortunate to have Diane Neal and Professor Malcolm Getz here. And Diane Neal, as many of you know, is the widow of Nashville, one of Nashville's most wonderful lawyers and most well-known lawyers, Jim Neal. And Diane has served in many capacities. In her experience, she was general counsel to Governor Ned McWhorter, has been general counsel for numerous public agencies, and she has been wonderful over the last months and year to get up to speed on the AMP and to participate in these debates on the AMP. We also have Malcolm Getz. Malcolm is a economics professor at Vanderbilt University, and he will be talking about a lot of the details of the AMP proposal and a lot of the shortcomings from his standpoint. So, without, are there any questions? Let me mention one other thing. I mentioned you can use the mic to make your questions known. If you are shy, or if you don't want to stand up and make give a question or ask a question, there are cards available, and somebody's passing these cards out. Yeah, Beth Reardon from Belle Meade City Manager's office has got some cards, and if you'll just wave at her, I guess Beth is the best way to do that. She'll come bring you the cards, and then we'll pick those cards up, and then I'll go through them up here and ask the question that way. So there are two ways to get your questions known, one orally and one in writing with the cards. So if there are no further questions, let's welcome Diane Neal and Malcolm Getz. Diane?
Thank you, Lee. I'm glad to know that a lot of you have already heard us, and yet you came back for more, and we'll try to liven it up a little bit tonight. I like mass transit. Malcolm likes mass transit too. We would like to see a well-planned, safe, affordable transit plan capable of being deployed on all major bus routes throughout the county and brought online within a reasonable period of time. Unfortunately, that does not describe the AMP. Now tonight, for the first time, I am happy to say it does describe an alternate plan that we are ready to recommend. Some of the features of this plan Malcolm will explore. More to come later. Our opposition stems from our own reading and analysis of data obtained from the MTA. Their own documents reveal that the AMP is this: a great deal of money to move a very few riders along a corridor whose highly developed businesses stand to be negatively impacted, and where already deficient intersections, by their own predictions, will become increasingly congested with the creation of the AMP. The MTA and the mayor have rolled this project out with little or no transparency. Keep in mind that the original study, the Parsons-Brinkerhoff report, that is what gave the underpinnings for this plan and from which everything else we have been told ensued. That report remains suppressed. The lack of transparency almost surely eased the move through the council to get early money for public relations and for planning. But the result was that there is a lack of widespread citizen support. In my meeting last year with the then FTA administrator, I presented this equation. Lack of transparency equals lack of public buy-in. Lack of public buy-in equals empty buses. Empty buses makes this a high risk for the allocation of federal dollars. Despite continued assurances from the MTA that they welcome your comments and your suggestions, make no mistake, there would be no public dialogue had Malcolm and I not done our due diligence to study this plan and then have the courage and the confidence in our research, and no small amount of courage, I might add, as I look at this audience, to come before you and stand for what we have discovered and risk the opposition's challenges. Over the past 18 months, the MTA has excused this inept plan by saying, first, we'll tweak this, but we've got to start somewhere. Now that was disturbing enough. But in January and February, they began to say that our challenges missed the mark because their plan is only 30% complete. Outrageous for them to excuse all of this time and millions of dollars in cost to market a plan to you that has no relevance to workers who live in all sectors of Davidson County. In commercial law, everyone knows the importance of full disclosure. Representations are made, warranties are given based on all relevant factors being disclosed. Why would any person believe that a citizen could make an intelligent judgment about the AMP if what they have been marketing to you is incomplete and misleading? Where is your right to know whether you are being asked to buy that proverbial pig in a poke? Keep in mind two major things they have yet to answer. Even Steve Goudreau, who has worked on BRTs in other cities, could not tell this. They could not tell you that dedicated lanes in the middle of comparable corridors in comparable cities have worked to ease traffic congestion. And most importantly, they cannot and have not told you with any gravitas, how are we going to pay for it? Which brings me to this week's news. On Tuesday, we learned that the president, in his budget, has recommended that the AMP get $27 million. Now let's put aside for the moment that immediately Senator Bob Corker issued a statement to wit, I think everyone understands the president's budget is not a serious document and will have no effect on policy. and put aside that Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat and chair of the Senate Budget Finance Committee, stated that there wouldn't even be any hearings on the president budget. Put those things aside and let's just take that inclusion and recommendation for what it is. It surely can be no surprise that President Obama supports mass transit. He also remarked in this budget that he wants to put money into the desperately underfunded Highway Trust Fund, and he wants to do something to repair the aging infrastructure around this country. Of course he supports mass transit projects. However, since the budget for fiscal year 2015 is already in place as part of a 2-year budget agreement passed by Congress and signed by this president in December 2013, the recommendation of the president has no relevance to whether this application gets FTA approval. There is a process that must take place in any competitive federal grant program. If you've got a couple of days, I invite you to go to the Federal Register. There are 45 pages that spell out those specific requirements before funding for such a project is approved. One very important requirement is that the local government must establish and commit to a dedicated source of funding that can sustain the project without sacrificing financial viability. If you have been keeping up with the unanswered questions in the council, you know that piece is missing from the AMP application. Now we know that the MTA executive director is leaving for another city. And you should know that among those 11 people who refused to appear before you tonight is the chairman of the MTA board, who at least could have come before you to explain the board's rationale for approving the AMP, Jeff Yarbrough. So, no one should leave here tonight under the impression that a line in the president's budget is anything more than a political endorsement. Now, here is the real tragedy for Nashville. It's that the AMP is such a flawed plan that if it were built, it will fail due to an insufficient ridership. And what follows from insufficient ridership? The disillusionment that will set in over the enormous subsidies required to sustain it. As a result, the political will so necessary to deploy an improved mass transit system for the city will be pushed back for decades to come. And the first serious conversation about transit in years will have come to naught. Thank you for listening.
I have to squeeze this button. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, very good. I'm delighted to be here and delighted that many of you have heard the talk before. It changes from time to time, and I'm happy to bring everybody up to speed. There are two strategies that for improving the quality of public transportation in Nashville that are relevant here. One of the strategies is the AMP strategy to put dedicated lanes for buses down the middle of a heavily traveled roadway, our major street for our city. The second strategy is to have buses in the curb lane in mixed traffic. The BRT strategy, BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, is the strategy which is deployed on Gallatin Road and quite successfully here. Also employed a year ago on Murfreesboro Road. We have experience with this strategy here and it works. It is the strategy in use in Seattle, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Kansas City, Austin, Texas, York, Ontario, and New York City. It is the dominant mode of bus rapid transit in the United States.
The AMP strategy for putting dedicated lanes down the middle of a roadway of the heavily traveled Central City arterial roadway is in use only partially in Springfield, Oregon, and in Cleveland, Ohio. The AMP strategy here, going down our city's parade route, is a radical departure from the norm for bus rapid transit. It is an extreme experiment. It is not a proven method for improving public transportation. It begs the question, why would this radical idea of putting dedicated lanes for buses down the middle of the roadway, why would that idea be advanced? And I believe the answer is that the Federal Transit Administration has an orientation toward building rail and supporting railroads. And in their guidelines, they refer to a requirement that 70% of the route for their Small Starts program, which is what the MTA is proposing to attract $75 million of federal grant funds, the Small Starts program requires that at least 70% of the route be in fixed guideways. That's their language. I have translated that and I call it dedicated lanes, because I think it's a more descriptive terminology. But you can hear the railroad orientation in the language of fixed guideway. And putting the bus rapid transit, the AMP, down the middle of the roadway has limited number of stops, as is typically found with trains. So, and even the language that's used here, instead of them calling them bus stops, they refer to them as stations. I feel like Jim Carlin here. The stations. And in the newspaper, you can read, it's described as subway-like. Subway-like.
Put it on the ground.
So let's look at let's look at some of the details here. Let's see if I can make this work. Here we go. So this is what the AMP looks like. This is from the AMP Transit Alliance. And what we see here is a loading platform in the center of the street. And then the red lane here is dedicated to an eastbound bus. The bus is to come every 10 minutes. And then on the other side is a red lane for the bus going in the westbound direction, with a bus to come every 10 minutes. The advantage of these dedicated lanes is that buses can maintain speed even when the regular traffic lanes are congested. The speed of the bus will be limited, of the AMP bus will be limited to about 15 miles per hour, scheduled time. And the reason for the limitation in the speed is because the rate of acceleration of the bus and the rate of deceleration is limited so that riders do not fall down and hurt themselves. So if the bus moved more quickly, it would do real harm to riders. That is the main limit on the speed of the bus. So 15 miles per hour scheduled speed is about the outer limit for this bus route when the stations are located a half mile apart. And I'll talk more about the spacing of the station. So what we see here is 7-lane roadway, 3 lanes of which are dedicated to the bus service. In addition, you see a crosswalk here. Those persons who are going to ride the bus must walk to the middle of the street. And there is a traffic light added here to stop traffic so that pedestrians can walk to the middle of the street. The FTA has language that says that people who are trying to rush to get to the bus have a tendency to try to broach the traffic to get through. I think particularly of school children who worry about being tardy, a little late for the bus, rushing through traffic. So I think there are genuine safety concerns here, and the MTA must evaluate safety considerations before their proposal can be approved by the Federal Transit Administration. Okay, so this gives us a look of what the AMP looks like. This is the route, 7.1 miles long from St. Thomas Hospital West to 5 points in the east, and there are 16 stops including the end points. So the stops are located about a half mile apart. The local bus service on this same route, I go to Google Maps to figure out how many stations there are. I'm not actually out counting them. There are 51 stops at the curb. So the AMP reduces the number of bus stops by 2/3, by a factor of 3. There is then an important trade-off in the design of the bus system between having the speedier bus as a consequence of having fewer stops. That's the advantage of the limited stop service. But the other side of that is that bus stops are, for many people, not as conveniently located. So many typical trips will require a longer walk to get to a bus stop to begin the trip, and also a longer walk at the end of the bus trip in order to get to a final destination. In the transit business, there is a general recognition that a minute of walk, wait, and transfer time is high in nuisance value. People value walk, wait, and transfer time at about 3 times a minute of moving time. A consequence of that is that the speed of the bus has to generate more than 3 times, or at least 3 times as much time savings as pedestrians will involve in walking and waiting for the bus. That is a tremendous burden for this design to achieve, because many people will find this an inconvenient route. That's the fundamental design choice here. Cost is approximately $175 million. So let's have a little closer look at what this will look like. Here's a photograph from Google Earth, from Google Maps, of West End Avenue, taken at about 33rd Avenue, facing west toward Ackland Park Drive and Murphy Road. You'll see on the left here are 3 lanes eastbound going down the hill, and in the morning traffic is backed up on I-440 essentially to Hillsborough Road, waiting for traffic to come down these 3 lanes. This is a heavily congested roadway in the morning rush hour. And then there's a turn lane in the middle, and then there are 3 lanes westbound, also heavily congested in the afternoon. This roadway carries 46,000 one-way trips on a typical weekday. It is a heavily traveled roadway. I'd like you now to envision the diagram we had just a moment ago overlaid on this photograph. So in the middle of the street, in this turn lane, there will be a loading platform 12 feet wide, wider than the turn lane. Then there'll be the red lane on the left dedicated to the bus. That would be about this lane here, but pushed over because the loading platform is wider. And then there'll be 2 lanes and for traffic that remain for traffic, and they'll be pushed over to the left as well. The plan which the MTA produced, their Phase 2 plan, which they sent to the Federal Transit Administration in September, involved narrowing these lanes to 10 feet in width from their current 11-foot width. I have understood now that the State Highway Authority will require that the lanes be 11 feet wide. This is a state highway. This is State Highway number 1. 11-foot wide lanes here will mean that additional land must be taken through purchase or eminent domain in order to provide space for the wider the widening of the street to accommodate the 11-foot bus traffic lanes and the 3 lanes for the buses. The cost of that additional right-of-way is not in the budget which the MTA provided to the Federal Transit Administration. On the right-hand side, we have the 3 westbound lanes. The plan is starting at about this point, for the grass berm and the sidewalk to be replaced with an additional lane. The sidewalk would be relocated to the north of the historic wall located here. Just how that will accommodate 11-foot lanes is, I don't know. So with that image of how the AMP will fit on that section of street, then we can turn to this diagram, and I apologize, a little fuzzy as best I could do, but this is a document from the Metropolitan Transit Authority. It is their Phase 2 plan, and it is the document, part of the documents which went to the Federal Transit Administration. On the left is Murphy Road, on the right is 31st Avenue. The red lanes are the AMP lanes. The green here is the loading platform. And starting on the left here at Murphy Road, you can see there are 3 lanes starting out, but the left-hand lane is a turn lane. Only 2 lanes flow through eastbound from Murphy Road past the loading platform, and then they fan out to 4 lanes for poising at the 31st Avenue traffic light. Today, there are 5 lanes eastbound at that traffic light. In the westbound direction, where today there are 3 lanes, the AMP plan reduces this to 2 lanes going westbound from 31st Avenue. Then it fans out with the additional lane on the right-hand side, as I explained a moment ago. So in this section of roadway, this very heavily traveled roadway, we lose 1 lane each way for traffic in order to install the dedicated lanes for the AMP bus program. This is a diagram of the volume of traffic. This is from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. The volume of traffic year by year, showing traffic trends over from 1983 to the most recent year along West End. The blue line is the volume of traffic at Fairfax and Murphy Road. And what we see here is a peak. The line is a statistical smoothing. The blue dots are the actual numbers from TDOT. What we see here is a peak in the flow of traffic in the late 1990s. Traffic has gone down about 10% in this section of roadway. The red line is showing Broadway at I-440. It peaked in about the year 2000, 2001, and has also gone down about 10%. So the notion that the volume of traffic is everywhere surging in Nashville as Nashville has grown is not supported by the best evidence available. So I don't have proof of why this has occurred, but my hypothesis is that an awful lot of housing has been built, very nice housing has been built downtown. I see high-rises. I see neighborhoods close to downtown which are attractive to people who work downtown. And nationally, we see that the length of commuting trips is shortening. People are living closer to where they work. As a consequence, the volume of traffic may well be going down. This shows it is going down, and that would be my hypothesis. It would be fun to try to sort out just exactly whether that hypothesis is the best explanation. So the first point is that the AMP will dramatically increase traffic congestion. And that point has been agreed to by Mr. Murphy, who is the engineer who designed most of the Phase 2 engineering. It's been agreed to by Steve Goudreau, who is the current engineer leading the Phase 3 engineering for the project. And everyone who looks at the street and thinks about what happens when you remove 2 lanes out of 6 through lanes of traffic, what's going to happen to traffic congestion? You don't have to be an engineer to know that the consequence for traffic congestion will be extreme. I want to turn to the effect on the quality of the bus service. So we're giving up street space to create lanes for buses. What will that do to bus ridership? And the first problem is that with stops every half mile through the Midtown area, and I'm focusing particularly between 440 and I-40, with a stop, there are only 4 stops over that 2-mile interval. Many of the hotels and restaurants are at a considerable distance from an AMP stop. So here is the Courtyard by Marriott Hotel, the Hilton Inns and Suites, and the Homewood Suites. They are beyond a normal walking distance from the AMP stop. And here are a number of restaurants that are also not conveniently located to AMP stops, but they are conveniently located to local bus service because there are 6 stops per mile, and the little blue bus stop signs are much more frequently located. So the AMP is a degradation of the quality of bus service serving the restaurants and hotels in Midtown. And from the point of view of service to conventioneers and visitors to the city, the local bus service does a better job of providing service to the restaurants and the hotels than the AMP does because it has limited number of stops. Let's talk about the major employers in Midtown. And these are the 3 hospitals and presumably the new HCA headquarters. The St. Thomas Midtown Hospital is a 1/4 mile, and this is Google Maps, tells me what the length is. It's a 1/4 mile from the closest AMP stop, which is at Louise Avenue at the Methodist Church at West End. A 1/4 mile is the outer edge of what people are normally willing to walk to get to a bus stop. In contrast, the St. Thomas Midtown is on the number 10 bus route. The number 10 bus route, the Charlotte bus route, goes out Church Street to 20th, turns right, and stops right at St. Thomas Midtown. The Centennial Hospital is 4/10 mile from the Louise Avenue AMP stop, but it is served also by the number 10 Charlotte bus, a block or 2 from Charlotte at 23rd. The Vanderbilt Medical Center is 8/10 mile from the nearest AMP stop, which is also the Louise Avenue United Methodist Church. The number 7 Hillsborough Road bus goes right out Hillsborough Road and has 3 different stops, each of which is 1 block away from different points of the Vanderbilt Medical Center. If you were downtown at Music City Central and wanted to take a bus to the Vanderbilt Medical Center, you would not take the AMP. You would take the number 7 bus. And the new HCA headquarters at 11th at Charlotte, it is a 1/2 mile from the, when I looked this up, I couldn't believe it. It's a 1/2 mile from the nearest AMP stop. And it is served directly by the number 25 Midtown bus, goes right down Charlotte to number 11. So the AMP provides a poor quality of bus service. And so as a consequence, it is not surprising that it attracts very few additional riders. And this is a summary of the ridership from the MTA's filing with the Federal Transit Administration in September. They're showing a total of 4,690 riders in the base year on the AMP. 900 of them are at the 3 stops west of I-440. But this document also shows that 86% of these rides are already riding the bus. So the number of new bus riders is something in the vicinity of 700 or 800 of them. And for the 900 that are west of Murphy Road, applying this 86%, there would be 129 of those are new bus rides. So we're removing 2 lanes of traffic from a street which carries 46,000 one-way vehicles a day in order to create a bus service which will attract in the base year 129 new bus riders. It gets worse. At launch, the AMP will only have 23 new bus rides system-wide. The MTA proposes to pay for the operating costs, the added costs of the more frequent buses and the longer hours of bus service with the AMP, to pay for that by cannibalizing the local bus service. The local bus will come every 40 minutes, cutting back the local bus service to every 40 minutes in order to pay for the operation of the limited stop AMP service. As a consequence of cannibalizing other routes, the effect on system-wide is essentially zero added bus riders after having spent $175 million on a new bus service. In contrast, bus rapid transit at the curb without dedicated lanes, as is used in most other cities, it's what we generally mean by bus rapid transit in the United States. At the curb, the shelters are out of traffic. Without exclusive lanes, there is much less effect on traffic congestion. The bus occupies the space where it is, otherwise the street is available for the flow of traffic. There are more stops in Midtown. Buses have the advantage over railroads in that they can be limited stop service for a long distance route, coming in from Bellevue, say, or from Rivergate, but when it gets to a dense destination area, they can offer many more stops where there are lots of people, lots of destinations. A train can't do that. Buses do that naturally. We avoid the expense of the barriers so we can serve many more routes much more quickly. We can dramatically improve the quality of bus transportation in Nashville much more quickly by putting the dollars into services which attract a lot more riders. And by having the bus stops at the curbside, we complement the local bus service. You can take a local bus service to a curbside shelter and transfer to the limited stop service for a longer distance ride. Evidence on the bus rapid transit. This is a photograph showing the successful Gallatin Road service here in Nashville. The MTA is saying it increased the ridership by 40% when they introduced this service. Here is the M15 route in New York City on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. It's a little bit shorter than the AMP route. It is carrying 55,000 rides per day. There is no question that bus rapid transit at the curb lane can carry an enormous capacity of travelers. You just have to put more buses on the route. This is the Wilshire Boulevard line, bus rapid transit in Los Angeles, also operating in the curb lane, 13,000 one-way trips per weekday. And Los Angeles is considering a bus priority lanes at the curb during rush hour, given the volume of bus traffic. That, I think, is a sensible strategy. When the volume of bus use and the number of buses reaches a level where they're taking a lot of street space, then giving buses priority is a sensible strategy. We have other ways of improving bus service. Hybrid buses have low platform, easier to get on and off. A limited stop bus service, I've described that. Local bus for shorter trips. The limited stop service and the local bus service are complementary. They serve different kinds of markets. They should work together. We have dynamic control of traffic signals. We have the ability to, and TransCore is a company here in town which it's an international company, markets it all over the world, TransCore. Go to the website, see the map where they have installations. They have sensors which sense the volume of traffic on a street. And then it adjusts the timing of the traffic light, the amount of red and green set in light of how much traffic. So if you think of an athletic contest letting out at Vanderbilt, it senses the surge in traffic, it turns the light green, but it turns the lights green all the way to the interstate. So the traffic just flows all the way through. That's an extreme example, but if you think of sitting at a red light and nothing's crossing, and you're sitting there for a couple of minutes, when this system works, it can sense you're there. There's no reason why it shouldn't change for you. They say that this increases the flow of traffic by 20% and more, depending on the specific installation. This kind of system, improving the flow of traffic but it also aware of buses and can also give buses a priority in flowing through. So this is well justified by the improvement in traffic and also benefits buses. We can have off-bus paying for bus fares, and I have detailed ideas about that, but I won't go into that, and also GPS, and the MTA is moving toward having a GPS system, so you can use your smartphone or the internet to locate where the buses are going and when they'll arrive at your stop. So that gives you a sense of the dramatic things that we can do to improve the quality of the bus service in our city by focusing on those things which give our dollars giving a lot more value for the money we put into it. Removing congested traffic lanes to create median lanes for buses is not a good idea. Thank you very much.